Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we are learning how being a beginner is probably the best thing that you can do for your photography. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. To all of you, my very beautiful photo friends. It is, oh my gosh, it is spring. Spring is officially here, even though last week it actually, here in Indiana, it actually snowed. We got like 3 inches of snow on a random day. I mean, I was playing disc golf with a buddy of mine on the weekend. It was 80 degrees. It was wonderful. Maybe it wasn't 80, but it was definitely warm, definitely in the 70s. There was no thought of possible snow, and then within 48 hours, we had 3 inches of snow. So, I mean, this is just, I don't know, typical Indiana weather, I suppose. We always get kind of that second winter before we officially break into spring, but it's good because, this year it happened well before we had already planted plants. Unlike last year, we had already planted stuff and then it froze probably towards the end of May. And then my garden was it was just a wreck after that. So I was happy that at least it happened this time, in April, and we hadn't planted anything yet and nothing was too far lost. But with spring here, oftentimes that means that because it is warmer, it means that we are getting out and we are taking photos and we are enjoying the sun. And all of those things just mean, capturing those moments. This is a great time because it's not winter, because you're not cooped up inside the house to get out and, start shooting. But for many of you, I know myself included, after a long winter, your eye for finding great shots might be, a little rusty. You might have rusty eyes. That sounds terrible. Rusty eyes. Jeez. I know that every year, my first wedding back after winter is always, not typically always, one of my least favorites for the years, because I'm just not in that flow state, and it feels like I'm learning on the job again. You know what I mean? So I thought this is kind of a good time to break those old habits. So rather than trying to get back into your old groove, I truly think that, spring and just this time when you're feeling a little bit rusty, when you got those rusty eyes, is just a great time to get out of your old groove and switch it up and just try something new. Because you will never know what you might find when you approach something with a fresh set of eyes. Okay? And as new photographers, oftentimes I will see, in the group that usually the newest of photographers are sharing oftentimes the most interesting photos. Now, of course, they're not going to be technically perfect in every aspect, and they're probably not going to win any awards, but it's always interesting for me to look at the images and kind of see how they worked it out in their head and see that, maybe they weren't following any specific rules, as if they haven't been, I don't know, tainted by the industry standard information, that photographers seem to get, and they're open to just trying something new, right? I'm sure that some of your happiest times in photography were perhaps before you even got your camera, when you were just out with a phone or, whatever, and you had no formal or even informal training on photography. You just went out and you were shooting and you enjoyed it enough to where you thought to yourself, well, maybe I need to learn a little bit more about how this whole photography thing works. That can oftentimes actually get us into a bit of a trap if you don't use it correctly, obviously. So again, today I'm going to be sharing actually 4 tips that I hope will foster that beginner's mindset again, so that you will be able to explore more with your camera and capture beautiful, meaningful moments that will also help you push you and your creative vision forward. So a lot that we're going to get to today. So let's go ahead and just jump right on in. But before we jump right on in, I actually want to share a story. I kind of jumped the gun there. I want to share a story. I was reading a book recently called Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt, and he shared something that I thought was really interesting, and I decided to dig a little bit deeper into it to find out kind of what the meaning was. So in 1938, there was a man named Jigoro Kano, and he is the creator of judo, which is a Japanese martial art form that has taken over the world and is actually an Olympic sport. So, this isn't like a fly by night thing. This is highly regarded, right? So in 1938, when Jigoro Kano died, he asked to be buried in his white belt. So, for those unfamiliar with martial arts, I'm not talking to you, Michael. I know that you're listening right now and you're probably going to fact check everything that I'm about to say. But the color of your belt is kind of like a ranking system, and it goes from like white, to yellow to green, I think, and then it goes through a gamut of colors until it ends up at black. Now, black signifies that you have spent a good amount of time practicing, putting what you have learned, into practice. So yeah, practicing. And now you are at the stage to where you are, I guess, a master, right? Proficient enough in this martial art form that you can go out and do it, and it is second nature to you. And congratulations, you've done it. So the symbolism of arguably one of the world's most skilled martial artists being buried in their white belt, designed for beginners, is that I think that we should always be looking at the world with more to learn. And no matter how well you think you know something, there's always going to be a million more things that you could, in fact, learn. And when talking, or I'm sorry, yeah, when taking a beginner's mindset, you look at the world differently. Different. Not differently, right? That was it's different. So, yeah, when taking that beginner's mindset, you always look at the world different, because you look at the world as if it has more to offer, and therefore, when there's more on offer, then there's more possibilities. So, again, what I really want to get to in this episode right here and these steps that I'm going to break down is that these are going to be ways that you can almost kind of reset or cleanse yourself from the barrage of photos and images that you see every day, in an attempt to kind of forge your own path, create your own voice, and that is through having a beginner's mindset, right? So let's go ahead and get on into it, right? So I said I'm going to share 4 tips with you. I got one special one just for premium members. So the first one is it's to do the opposite. We often get stuck in some sort of a groove. I know I sure do. It's very easy for me to do that. I think for humans, it's very easy to just kind of want to follow either the path that you've been given or are being guided down. And then you just kind of do that over and over and over again because it works. Like, why do anything else? So again, either because that's what we've been told or we just found something that works, we tend to do the same things. We are creatures of habit. So I want to challenge you, because when it comes to photography, this can be not tricky. What's the word? This can be a bit of a trap. When you're first learning photography, it can be hard just to get exposure anywhere near correct. So when you find something to where it starts working, you think, okay, I don't want to touch it. Like, this is good. I'm just going to stick with this. And then oftentimes that can stop us from moving forward and, trying other ways of doing it, in this case, exposure. But when I think with new photographers, or, when we're looking to learn photography, one of the things that we learn a lot about is lenses. And lenses, I think, it's going to be a great example here. We learn about lenses There's different focal lengths, as like how wide or how, telephoto your lens is going to be, how close you can get to something. And then we're taught like when to use them. So if you have a lot that you want to get into a scene, well, use a wide angle lens. It's going to capture a wide field of view. If something's pretty far away and you want to be kind of close to it, use a telephoto lens so that you can, get closer to that thing. But I want you to do the opposite, because it's when you do the opposite, when you do the thing that nobody else is expecting, that's when you're going to find really, really interesting results. So next time, choose, whatever your instinct is. Choose zooming in rather than zooming out. If you're like, wow, there's a lot of things going on right here, it'd be great to have like a wide image of all this. Sure, get the wide image, but then do the opposite. Just zoom in all the way and then just focus on those things that you have determined is interesting and get close-ups of all of those things. It might work, it might not, but it's worth a shot. That's one thing that I did pretty early on that helped me. I was always a big fan of the super wide angle lens. I loved it. I thought if you can master, getting a lot of context and finding the right moment with, a 16 millimeter lens on a full frame camera, like, you're a fantastic photographer. Like, that's what it takes, is having that eye to see everything all at once and have it come together. But then quickly I realized, man, a lot of these photos just simply aren't as compelling as I was hoping. People are actually pretty small in these photos. They don't, you don't look at a photo and think like, wow, like you don't instantly connect with them. So I just started kind of doing the opposite. And I would take that one wide photo and then I would, zoom it in. I would go to, on that lens, it was a 16 to 35. I would go to, no, I'm sorry, I had the 17 to 40. So then I'd go to 40 and then I would just take a bunch of shots slightly closer up of all the things in that wide frame that I found were kind of interesting. And almost immediately I realized, oh, you know what's funny is that all of these tighter shots I find more compelling. Just a little bit, it's not a massive change, but because somebody is larger in a frame, I can connect with them a whole lot easier. We as humans connect with them a lot easier. We get more detail. We get more facial expression. The eyes are larger. And therefore, if I didn't simply just try that one day at a wedding, then, maybe I would still be shooting ultra wide stuff. I don't know. But doing the opposite definitely helped me in that situation there. So, again, you could not only that, but you could choose to get close with a wide angle lens. You could use a 16 millimeter lens and get really close to something to make it larger in the frame. Or you can get super far away and use a telephoto lens so that your subject is still pretty small in the frame, but you use that telephoto lens. These are all things that are just made to make an image more compelling and help tell the story that you want to tell. So having these tools in your toolbox is what it's all about. And when you try new things, again, you just see things in a new way, and the way that things click for you kind of takes a different path in the wiring of your brain, and I think can help you in the future. And if you only have the one lens, I don't know, maybe consider renting a lens that you normally wouldn't. That's always a great option as well. I've always loved renting lenses. Here locally, we have a camera shop called Camera Lens Rentals. They're online as well, cameralensrentals.com. Fantastic group of people. We got Barry in there. He's super nice, always informative, and interested in what you're doing as well. So if you have any questions, he's always happy to, lead you kind of down a path as far as what could best help you, in whatever it is that you're trying to capture, what lens. They also have cameras and drones too, which I really like, because unfortunately they don't rent Fuji gear. So now it's pretty much just drones and, video cameras if I ever need more of a high-end DSLR. So again, that's Camera Lens Rentals if you want to check them out. But I think this is interesting to consider because there is a path of, quote unquote rules that we're given when it comes to lenses and things like that. But let's consider for a moment, if every industry just kind of did what it was supposed to do and, well, it works, so we're just going to keep it that way, we would still be driving a Model T. That sounds terrible. That sounds absolutely terrible. Just because we had some semblance of a vehicle and it worked and it got you from point A to point B, it didn't stop automotive engineers and designers to think outside the box and figure out how we could do things differently. And I think, again, that we can all agree that automobiles are in a much better place today than they were with the Model T. So just do the opposite. Do the opposite. Whatever you think you should do the opposite. I know there's a lot of Seinfeld fans out there. You know what I'm talking about. Just do the opposite. It works. All right. Now, tip number 2. I'm excited for this one. Do what others are not to take photos like no one else. So there's a I think it's a Dave Ramsey quote. He says, "Live like no one else, so you can live like no one else," or something like that. It's financial advice. It's on that same level there. So this is kind of my take on that. Do what others are not to take photos like others are not, perhaps. So I don't know if you remember, if you've been listening to the podcast for any sort of time, then you'll remember my conversation with Shane Balkowitch, and he is a wet plate photographer from North Dakota. So real quick, if you haven't heard that interview, please go back and listen to it. It is a gem. It is truly fantastic to hear his take on photography. He doesn't even consider himself a photographer. So, but what wet plate photography is, he uses chemicals. Let me see if I can get this right. He uses chemicals poured onto a plate of glass to then make that plate of glass photosensitive. It's one of the very first photography processes, which dates back to the mid 1800s, and he still does it today. Like, this isn't some like crazy science experiment that he like, oh, let's see if this works. Like, this is crazy old technology, and he still does it today. And because it takes a lot of work, very, very few people are willing to go through all that work to capture these images. And they're really interesting images. So he has been able to make quite a name for himself very quickly. Now, for me personally, I love using flash at weddings. Now, I know that this is nowhere near that's kind of like a terrible example. Like, oh, this person hit like 200 home runs last year. It's like, oh, great. I, once played on an adult softball league, like these are two very different levels of, doing things that others aren't, because there are many people who use flash photography, but I think that more people use natural light photography, probably just because it feels safer than using flash, and therefore like using flash scares a lot of people, but it truly opens up the door for the type of images that you're going to be able to get. And for me here in Indianapolis, I know for a fact that I've been able to book many weddings just because I'm proficient in using flash. A couple will come to me and say something like, we're having a send off, we're having sparklers, we're doing, something outdoors. So, knowing that I can light the scene and it doesn't just look like I cranked up my ISO to, 12,000, they like that because it's a better image quality, because I can use a lower ISO and use artificial light with flash. And again, it's not hard to do. But remember that photography is it's just capturing light. So what's great about flash is that when you're in control of the light, the image is yours. And honestly, it is much simpler than you think. So, in fact, in all of May, I'm going to be talking about lighting in Photo Minute Mondays. So if you don't know, in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community, every Monday I post a quick one. It was only supposed to be like a 1-minute video, but sometimes they're 2, maybe 3 minutes, but relatively short videos where I talk about a single subject about photography, and then post that within the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community, just so that you can continue to learn throughout the year and try new things. Oftentimes there's even new fun exercises. So again, in May, I'm talking all about light, including flash as well. So if you're not already a part of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community, join now so that you don't miss out. But we're going to be talking about things like intensity of light, quality of light, and how to find good light around you. So, natural light is also important. I will give you that. The majority of my photos are actually natural light, but when you have flash photography in your toolkit, again, you do something that so many other people cannot do because you are simply creating that light. So if you want to learn more, obviously join the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. And yeah, come in on a Monday and you're going to learn quite a bit. All right. Tip number 3 here is just to change up your rhythm. So this one is, it's kind of like do the opposite, but it's a little bit different. So change up your rhythm. So this spring for our family has been absolutely crazy. It was a very boring winter here in Indiana. It was interesting because there's been like years in the past where it has been crazy cold and like obviously you can't go outside. But this year it wasn't as cold, but it just seemed. I mean, we probably had more days below freezing, like more consecutive days below freezing than any other year that I've lived here in the past 10, or at least it felt that way, right? So we were ready on top of, 2020 and not really being able to go anywhere or do anything. We have just been going mad. So we drove out to Arizona to, just be hopefully in a warmer climate, which it kind of was, but it was also kind of not, which was unfortunate. But anyway, we spent 2 weeks out in Arizona, being outdoors as much as possible, and it was beautiful and it was lovely. And then we came home, and then 5 days later, we drove down to Florida for a week as well to house sit a friend's house who was leaving. They got dogs. So we drove down there and took advantage, obviously, of the opportunity to get out safely and still be able to go to the beach, which was, we don't have many of here in Indiana, as you can assume. But that was all of that for me to say that when I got back from Florida, well, I guess let me step back. When I'm gone, I really try to do my best to completely disconnect and be present with the family. So when I got back from Florida, and I'm getting into work, it totally changed my rhythm. And I think that I saw things differently, almost in a way that's going to help me move my business in a slightly different direction, but it's going to be something that is a lot more manageable, I believe, for me. So rather than, for basically all of last year, waking up, coming downstairs, turning on the computer, getting coffee, writing, either a blog post or reaching out to guests or, whatever it is that I do in front of the computer, by changing up my rhythm, by being gone almost for like 3 whole weeks away from the computer, when I got back, I realized like, wait a second, like the way that I've been doing things is all wrong. And again, I know that we like to be in a rhythm. We as humans like to be in a rhythm. It feels comfortable. It feels safe for us. But that also means that you can be blind to things that you are not seeing. So when I, in my photography, start feeling a little bit bored with the photos that I'm taking or that I'm using, or, that I'm processing rather, it is simply because I'm just following a rhythm that I'm used to doing, and this is how I do it, and it works. So I change, it's when I get into that, I get bored with my images and like, I kind of get burnt out and I don't want to do them anymore. So when I find myself feeling that way, I will take my photos in Lightroom and just go nuts editing them. Like just go bananas, right? So as many of you know, I have 52 free Lightroom presets that I give away, more than happy to give away, let you download and bring those into Lightroom and really start transforming your images, which is great for beginners, those new to Lightroom, just learning how to use it because it's going to help you get a really good photo quick, but also let you understand that presets are not a one-click answer and that it's going to help you find your style when editing. So actually, you can if you haven't already, you can download those 52 Lightroom presets by either heading to the show notes of this episode, which if you're just in Apple Podcasts, I believe that you can just swipe up and you'll see a link there in the show notes, or by just heading to learn.beginnerphotographypodcast.com. That's learn, Learn, beginnerphotographypodcast.com, and then you'll see not only the presets but some other educational things that I got there. But you can sign up for the presets, download them right away. I'll even give you the guide to install them and whatnot so that you can get working. But I like to equate going nuts in Lightroom as if you're going on a hike. When you go on a hike, you're not going on a hike really to, at least for me, you're not going on a hike to get anywhere specific. It's not like, oh, I got to go to the other town, or I got to go to the watering hole, or, whatever. And then you have to hike to get there to find a destination. Most of us hike recreationally, and therefore we're not hiking to get anywhere. You're going on a hike simply just to be outside and enjoy your time in nature. So when I go nuts on my editing, I'm not doing it to produce an image that I'm going to share or anything like that. I simply do it just to play around within Lightroom and open up my mind. And that's it. That's it. I'm gonna go somewhere crazy with this image, and then that's it. No, that was a fun time. I got to mess around with this, and that was cool. And that's it. But oftentimes you'll find, oh wow, actually I didn't know that, when you use the clarity slider with in this sort of setting, maybe with clouds or lots of detail, it does something interesting with the details. And I like that in combination with this other thing, whatever it is. Obviously you're going to have to figure out what that's going to be for you based on the sliders that you're using and whatnot, but you will find that it will do something, and you will discover something when you just give yourself free reign to say, I don't even care if this photo is going to look good. Like, I'm just going to do something. I'm just going to start going bananas on these sliders and just see what comes up. It's been a while since I've had some Earl Grey. Okay, so let's go ahead and recap. We got 1, do the opposite. We got 2, do what others are not, to take photos like others are not. 3, change up your rhythm. And now 4, this one's the scary one. Share them. Yes. When you take a photo, congratulations. You took a photo. And I hate to say this, and this isn't meant to sound rude, nobody cares. Nobody cares because it doesn't do anything. It's not going to make an impact on anybody. If nobody ever sees it, nobody's going to care about it. Photography is a form of storytelling. And I'm sure that you could think of, maybe you have a favorite author. Imagine if they wrote a book or something like that and just never released it. I'm sure that regardless of what the book was about, simply because they're one of your favorite authors, you would love just to get your hands on it and read it and check it out. But I know that this can be scary, especially if you're new to photography. So, okay, I got another story. Story time. I love stories. So a few years ago, a buddy and me would go out and we would play disc golf every once in a while. So if you don't know what disc golf is, it's kind of like golf. There's a basket instead of a hole, and then you kind of play with a frisbee. It's more of a like a heavy duty professional grade frisbee, I guess you could call it. You start, 400 or 500 feet away, sometimes even more, and then you got to get close to the basket and get it in. Person after 18 holes, lowest score wins. Okay. So, we really wouldn't play a ton. We definitely were not pros at all. And over the past maybe 3 years, I'd say that I've maybe played a dozen times. Again, not a ton. That's like 4 times a year. So now that I think about it, maybe I played less than a dozen times. But a few days ago, I was chatting with a neighbor of mine, and he invited me out to his buddy's house, who spent all of last year building a disc golf course in his backyard. I was like, how cool is that? That's like the dream. Oh my gosh, to have a property like large enough to be able to do something that cool with. I immediately was like, yes, well, let's do this. That sounds incredible. So he continues to talk about it, and he's like, yeah, it's going to be a real fun time. It's probably going to be about 40 people or so there. There's going to be teams. And immediately I got nervous. I was like, what did I just get myself into? I thought that it was going to be me, him, and his buddy just like outside in nature, just playing around at disc golf. And like, that was going to be it. But now there's teams. Does that mean that there's a tournament? And I will be honest, the night before, I really thought about backing out just in fear of making a complete fool out of myself surrounded by, 40 plus pros. I mean, I don't know. You don't just build an entire course in your backyard just for kicks. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be pretty good if you're gonna go through all that effort. But my wife was like, no, you should go and just enjoy it anyway. So get out of the house, and so that's what I did. I went, I stuck with it, and I went. And when I showed up, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find that not only was a large percentage of the people who were there like just friends and family who came out to support their friend in building a disc golf course, but by being around others who were even just slightly more advanced than me, I'll be honest, I picked up a lot of pointers, specifically on my backhand. I was not very good with the backhand. It feels very awkward with the wrist, and I could never do it with any sort of consistency. And I got some really good tips on how to be better at that. So score, you know? By the end of the day, it was a total win. And I think I only shot 11 over. Again, not great, but I have played much worse. My point being here is that when you take the leap out of your comfort zone, you're going to find things typically turn out better than you expect. It's never as scary as you think it's going to be. Our minds love to play these games of like, yeah, but sounds pretty scary. But it rarely, rarely ever is. And I've even shared the story before that, before every wedding that I show up to, I try to get there early, just in case traffic or whatever. So I'm usually sitting there a few minutes before I have to go in. And every time I'm just sitting there either in the, parking lot of a church or in front of somebody's home or a hotel. And it's just like butterflies in my stomach, just wreaking havoc on my insides. But the second that I get inside, I feel infinitely better. So I encourage you to share your photos. It's not going to be as scary as you think it is. In fact, the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community is full of helpful photo friends out there who realize truly that everybody is, on a different or at a different stage in their photography journey. And we are more than willing to help when you have a question about photography or are looking for tips to improve certain aspects of your photography. So sharing photos is a huge, huge, huge way that you can kind of regain that beginner's mindset, because putting yourself out there is going to force yourself to look at your images a little bit more critically before you post them. So for premium members, one of the things that we do as photographers is that we have to share our images. We cannot just take images, like we can't just live in a vacuum of shooting, booking clients, shooting, booking clients. We have to use our images to market ourselves and put ourselves out there, because ultimately that's how people are going to find us and become interested in our services and then ultimately book us for said services. So when it comes to sharing your photos, and I know that Kim is all over this as well, one of my favorite tools is Animoto. So if you don't know, Animoto is like a slideshow type app. So what it does is you load up a few photos and then it just goes like crazy with these different like slideshow templates, and it's really immersive, and it doesn't feel like, an old click, here's a slide, now I'm going to talk about this, click, it's like a slideshow for the Facebook, Instagram, and I don't know, YouTube generation, I suppose. But you can use them for marketing, which is great. So that's one thing that I love to do, is that I will take my images from last year and then put them into like a type of slideshow and it'll have some sort of theme. So maybe it'll be night portraits. It'll just be a ton of night portraits, and it's just a slideshow of beautiful night portraits. And of course, you can put text over it, like, why is everybody going nuts for night portraits? And then you can educate them a little bit. Night portraits are a great way for you to escape the busy day and just spend a few minutes alone. Night portraits can be extremely creative. Night portraits let you get something that others don't get. Night portraits are just really fun, enjoyable photos, and really create great memories as well from your wedding day. And then you make a few versions of those. You can even change some of the images because, again, you as a photographer typically are not your ideal client. So when you can when you are building something, when you're about to post something, getting different perspectives is wonderful, but if you can't get different perspectives, then make a ton of different versions. Change around the placings of your images. Try to find other marketing material from other photographers, just to see what sorts of things they find interesting. Because if you are, I take that back. One of my favorite tips for marketing as a photographer is that you probably have a pretty good idea of who your ideal client is. Figuring out, like, well, what are some things that they love? And I love thinking about like what stores they like to shop in. So let's just take Target, for example. One thing that you can do is look at Target's marketing, either their social media or their website. Like, what words are they using, their commercials online? Um, Figure out how it is that they're marketing to their clients, and then kind of reverse engineer that and figure out, why is this working? For me, I think it's Target isn't as focused on price as something that, say, like Walmart would be, but Target seems to be focused more on, it's a little bit more whimsical. There's probably a higher chance of you finding something interesting there. It's a bit of a younger crowd. It's more, I don't want to say loud. Loud isn't the word, but like, they're not afraid to put their voice out there. And I think for a lot of people that resonates with them. So you can now in turn do the same thing in your photography business. You can take, because Target has a massive marketing budget, and they have a massive budget for figuring out exactly who their ideal client is and how to talk to them. So if your ideal client loves Target, well, great, just piggyback off of Target to talk to your ideal client, but just in your own words. So again, that's where Animoto is fantastic, because it lets you not only showcase a variety of images, right? Because it's constantly flashing on the screen, new images. You could probably put 20 images in like a 30 or 45-second long video, and then even put in some text in there as well that's going to draw people in more. So always guess, or always try something new with that in terms of the designs of your ads. So with that, nighttime portrait example that I gave, I will make 4 or 5 different examples, or 4 or 5 different final versions, so that when I go to put those out online, I'm going to get, a good, not sample. I'm going to get a good response as far as which one is going to work the best. Maybe it's the one with the the stars. Maybe it's the one with the long exposure light trails. Maybe it's just the one where they're standing in front of their venue at night kissing. I don't know. But if I don't know, I'm going to make as many versions as possible, put it out on Facebook, and then test. Worst case is that it doesn't do very well and nobody sees it again, because Facebook's not going to show it to people, 15 minutes after you post it anyway. So just go ahead, guess, and check, and try something new. Again, when it comes to photography, we are always looking to improve our skills, and we are looking to become better at photography. But taking the mindset of a beginner, taking the mindset of somebody who's willing to test things out and just try something new and say, well, if it doesn't work, then oh well, like I'll try again. That is what will lead to that long-term success. And part of me thinks that, that's why, even with a name like Beginner Photography Podcast, you find photographers who have been listening. Maybe that's you. Maybe you find photographers who have been listening far longer than after they are, no longer beginners. How am I trying to say that? You'll find that people, even after they would no longer consider themselves beginners, are still listening to this podcast. And it's because or maybe you understand the concept of a beginner's mindset, and being open to hearing and trying new and different things to push yourself forward. Again, photography doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not, one and done. It's not, let's figure out how this thing kind of works and then just stick with that for the next, X amount of years. It's, you always have to be trying new things. And that is how you're going to discover those things so that you can find what you find as an artist fulfilling, to create images that you find inspiring, that you will want to share, that your family will love in the future. Photos with intention. That's the way that you do it. So that is it for this week. Until next week, try your hardest to forget everything that you ever learned about photography and almost start over, or be willing to accept the idea that you know nothing about photography, and that, you know, the whole world is an endless space for information for you to bring in and continue to grow your understanding of this wonderful art form that we use to not only tell stories, but essentially freeze time and let us come and revisit it whenever we wish. Again, that is it for this week. Until next week, really try these tips to improve your photography. Get out, keep shooting, stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.